So The Mask with Jim Carrey is 30 years ago. It's crazy. Like the 90s only feels like it's like 20 years ago. I saw something recently where Madonna's debut album was 41 years ago. How did I get here? How did I become this old dude? It doesn't seem like that's long ago. But back to The Mask. So The Mask is a brilliant film. If you ever watched it, go check it out. But 1994 was a brilliant time for Jim Carrey. Now he's coming off Living Color, so he's still on Living Color, right? Because even after Ace Ventura was a hit, he was still doing Living Color. Like Keenan came out of Wayans, Damon Wayans, all the Wayans family was gone by this point, and Living Color was limping towards the end of its run. So then we have 1994. So The Mask comes out in July of 1994, but also in February of 1994, Jim puts out Ace Ventura. It's insane that he had two films out not only within the same year, but within the same few months. But that was back in the era where actors was just making films like crazy. Like Tom Hanks, he went through that. Like Tom Hanks made Splash. I think Splash was like 84 with Ron Howard. And that was a huge hit. Huge hit. But then Bachelor Party came out a few months later. It's almost like, because Bachelor Party, he filmed Bachelor Party. I think he filmed that before Splash. And it seemed like the studio that owned the rights to Bachelor Party said, don't we have a Tom Hanks film? And said, yeah, it's called Bachelor Party. It has a donkey in it. Cool, the kids will love it. And they put that film out. And as much as I love Splash, whenever a Bachelor Party is on, I'm watching that film. They don't make those 80s films, they can never make those films again. Because it was too over the top. They would never make those films again. But yeah, I love Bachelor Party. So good. But back to The Mask. So yeah, so 94 was very crucial to Jim Carrey. But The Mask, as important as Ace Ventura was, because Ace Ventura was his first hit, but Jim could have been a one-hit wonder. The Mask was important in a few ways for him. One, it showed that he can have two hits. But three, it was a bridge film for him. And what I mean that is, it showed his dramatic side. Now, Jim, before Living Color, he got Living Color in 1990, I think. But before then, Jim was in the industry. Like if you look at his IMDb, he put in work. I think he had the TV show The Rubber Duck Factory. He did Earth Girls Are Easy with Damon Wayans. I think he was in Peggy Sue Got Married. Jim was putting in work. He was in Rodney Dangerfield. Used to have this comedy showcase where he spotlighted young comedians. I think he had Arsenio at one point and Andrew Dice Clay. I think he had Jim Carrey at one point. Jim was putting in his 20s, he was putting in work. He was dating Linda Ronstadt. He was an unknown comedian dating Linda Ronstadt back in the 80s. Jim was putting in work, but Jim couldn't find that hit until he got Living Color. And then for Ace Ventura, they was looking for a bunch of people, and Jim came cheap. And I'm sure the writers, I'm sure the script for Ace Ventura was just stupid. And they said, Jim, you got something? And I think Jim probably improvised most of that dialogue. And I think I heard, Jim Carrey didn't think Ace would be a hit. He said, no one's going to see this film. It's horrible. And it became a hit. And had Courtney Cox in it. And it probably helped her seal her deal with Friends. Because I think Friends came out in 94, I think. But I think it sealed it. Because she was known at that time. I think she was still dating Michael Keaton. When he was doing Batman, I think Michael Keaton was dating Courtney Cox. But her acting career was on the low end at that point. And then Ace blew up, and then Friends blew up, and that's the history over there. So yeah, so for Jim, it's a bridge film for him because it got to show off his dramatic skills. Being any student of that game of comedy and film, you know that dudes like Steve Martin and Robin Williams made that transition from being wild and crazy comedians to being really good dramatic actors. Steve Martin was the wild and crazy guy in the 70s who wore the white suit, the arrow through the head, hosted SNL a bunch. The Jerk is an amazing comedy. If you never watched it, please go watch it. But he knew he couldn't be this guy forever. And then after The Jerk, he made Pennies from Heaven, which is totally different from The Jerk. Totally different. And then, after that showed that he can do comedy. He wasn't just this wild and crazy guy. And then we get films like Parenthood, Father of the Bride, Roxanne, one of my personal favorite films. So Steve proves hey, I can do comedy, but I can also do drama. Robin Williams did the same thing. He was Mork from Mork, over the top, rapid fire, Jim Carrey 1.0, genius, even though he stole jokes, but genius mind. But he knows that he couldn't play Mork from Mork forever. And then he did The World of Carter and Garp. And I'm sure people who went to see that film was like, what is this? Where's Mork? But he knew, one, he couldn't play Mork forever. And two, he was a trained classical actor. Like he studied with Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve was his best friend. Like he could really do drama. And then when he did Garp, that opened the door for him to do Go Boring Vietnam, Awakenings, and then when the Oscar for Good Will Hunting, Moscow on the Hudson. Like Robin Williams, man, so good, so sorely missed. So Jim watching this, you see these guys. He's in like Eddie Murphy too. Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, same thing. You see these guys and realize I need to make it. I got to do a transition. I got to transition out. But The Mask was perfect for him because on one hand, he's doing the wild stuff. He's doing the crazy stuff. He's doing like when he turns into the Mask. I feel like he took inspiration from the Tex Avery, Tom and Jerry cartoons, where it was like the early the violent ones, where the eyes was bugged out like ah, or the jaw was like ah. I feel like Jim did that. I think he took inspiration from those Tex Avery because that's what it seemed like the Mask was, just this over the top figure. So he did that, but at the same time, he played this insecure guy, no friends, no girlfriend. He worked as a bank teller. He has his dog. He lived by himself. He lived a humdrum, sad, boring life. And if you look at his career, if you look from A Living Color, even with Ace Ventura, every character he played that was in comedy was super confident. Fire Marshal Bill was horrible as his job, but he was super confident. Ace Ventura was a maniac, but he was super confident. Even in Dumb and Dumber, what he would do later, stupid as hell, very confident. But he played a guy who was very insecure. And I think that was crucial to Jim Carrey's career, because if he went from Ace Ventura to Dumb and Dumber, I think Jim would have been locked into that type of character, that type of actor. But because he showed that drama displayed in The Mask, he was able to show, I can play this over the top guy, but I can play subtle. Robin Williams showed the same thing. Steve Martin did the same thing. I can play subtle. Eddie Murphy did the same thing. He knew he can play Axel Foley for a long time. When he played Prince Hakeem in Coming to America, Prince Hakeem in a lot of ways was the straight man. He said some funny stuff in there, but Eddie played that role pretty straight. He wasn't Axel Foley. He wasn't the guy. He wasn't Reggie Hammond from 48 Hours. He played that role pretty straight. Now, he played the other characters. That was funny, but he played that character straight. Even when we get to the clumps of Eddie Murphy, the Nutty Professor, he was playing her. He was in a fat suit, but at the same time, I always felt like he should have been nominated for an actor just because you felt sorry for Sherman Klump, because he wasn't Axel Foley. He was just a regular. He was a chubby guy. He just wanted love. It was a beautiful thing. So Jim Carrey was the same way. He was like, no, I can show you I can play crazy, but I can play subtle. I can play dramatic. And because of that film, we got to see Liar Liar and The Truman Show and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Man on the Moon and The Cable Guy and all these films that came out later, so he was able to show these different sides of his personality, not just Fire Marshal Bill, not just Ace Ventura. And in fact, I feel like Jim should have won an Oscar. He had The Truman Show. He should have won for Man in the Moon, and especially Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Like, that film is so raw. It's like, what would you do if the love of your life zapped her brain and doesn't remember you? Would you zap your brain if you felt you were hurt in your relationship and you want to forget your relationship? Like, it's just so good. But that's how the Oscars are, man. They hate giving Oscars to comedians who are really good at their craft. And maybe they're mad because comedians have shown that they can do drama sometimes better than dramatic actors can do comedy. And maybe it's just an elitist type thing with the Oscar voters. Because they say, well, how dare these comedians outact us? Even when you look at Kevin Hart and Cat Williams, like they've been pretty good with dramas too, especially Cat. Like, Cat's really good. Like, when he was on Atlanta, he won an Emmy for his role in Atlanta. It was a one-off role. I think he was on it twice, but his one guest appearance, he was really good. So yeah, I think it's a elitist thing with the Oscars. So like, oh, how dare you? How dare these comedians show how good they are as actors? So yeah. So from that standpoint, The Mask was so crucial to Jim Carrey. And another reason why The Mask works was Cameron Diaz. I remember when I was looking at that film, and I was like, who is that woman? She is beautiful. It's almost like they was looking at TCM, and they said they was watching a film for the 40s, and they was watching a black and white film with this sex pot in it, and it's like, who's that girl? Her name is Cameron Diaz. Well, teleport her from 1944 and bring her into 1994. She was a femme fatale. She was film noir. She was Jessica Rabbit. She was stunning. And I think I saw on Reddit, there was a guy who said, I don't think she's been as sexy in any of her films since then. Or I have to agree. Like she was super sexy in The Mask. But I think the Cameron Diaz that we see like in mm, like Charlie's Angels, I think that's really her. Something About Mary, I think that's really her. I think she's goofy sexy. She knows she's pretty. I think we know that. She knows she's pretty, but I think she's really goofy at the same time. So what we see in Charlie's Angels, I think that's really her. I think her in The Mask was probably her. She probably had to build herself up to play that character because I don't think she probably is. I don't think she sees herself that way as this sexy, alluring type chick. I think she's a goofy, laughing type chick who happens to be really pretty. But when you're, if you're the audience and you're in your 20s or you're some college dudes, college dudes, or high school dudes, and you're watching that film, like, oh my God, she's beautiful. I want to meet her. But she was great in that role. So if you got Cameron Diaz and you got Jim Carrey and you got a script that's really good, it's actually a good story to it. Better than Ace Ventura. Ace Ventura was just something put together. Because even Jim didn't think Ace would be a hit. He felt like no one's going to see this film. It's trash. I think he told Tommy Davidson that. I think he said, no one's going to see that film. It's horrible, and it became this huge hit. But Ace Ventura, The Mask was such a superior film to Ace Ventura that it proved, again, that Jim could do, he got back-to-back hits. And it just opened the doors up. I think after that, he did Dumb and Dumber. And I think that's when he met Lauren Holly and married Lauren Holly. And then they later got divorced. But then he just had those string of hits, man. He did not. From 2004 with Ace Ventura and The Mask up until Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind to 2004, that dude didn't miss. The only miss that he had was probably The Cable Guy. And The Cable Guy, he tried to pivot again because he's like, I can do these films. I can do in my sleep. But let me show you something even darker. I think The Cable Guy was ahead of his time. If it came out like after The Sopranos or after like Breaking Bad, I think it would have been a solid hit. But people weren't ready to see Jim almost like as an anti-hero type person, even though he was right in that role. It was just too early. And I don't think people were just like, hey man, we like you as the crazy guy. We like you as this caring, dramatic actor. We can't take you as this psychopath. But it's a good, solid movie. It was just ahead of its time. So what do you think? What do you think of The Mask? If you've seen it recently, what do you think of that film? What do you think of Cameron Diaz? What do you think is Cameron Diaz's best role? Is it A Mask? Is it Bad Teacher? Tell me what you think of her best role is. And what do you think is Jim Carrey's most underrated role? He's really slowed down acting wise. He's 62, right? And like I said, he put all that work in back in the 80s. So he slowed down a bit. And plus there's some stuff happens in his personal life. And then after 2004, his choices of films kind of went up and down. Like he wasn't able to find those films, but they all do it. They all have that streak where they just are untouchable. Will Smith, Tom Cruise, Eddie Murphy, Tom Hanks, where they just go through this streak, man, where they can't miss, and then they go to that streak where they're kind of missing. And then, like I said, he has some personal stuff, but it seems like he's back on a good footing again. But it seems like the only film that he does now is the Sonic the Hedgehog films, because the only thing I've seen in his IMDb in recent years he's done was Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, and 3. That's it. So it's like, hey man, I'm 62. I made my money. I'm happy. It seems like whatever thing that drove him in the 80s and 90s just kind of dissipated. And he probably, he never won an Oscar, so he never achieved that. But he achieved, from an artistic standpoint, he probably achieved everything he wanted to achieve. And again, he grew up poor. Like, there was a time when his family lived in a car, and the story was he wrote a check to himself for $1 million, and because he wanted to be a success. And whatever success that he found, either in his craft or financially, I think whatever drive he had before just kind of went away. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we have this fine discography for one of the most talented, not just comedic actors, but probably one of the most brilliant actors of the past 20 years.